My wife won $19.5 million in the lottery. I thought our lives were set until she kicked me out of our house. Her family stood there and laughed as I dragged my suitcase to the curb. They thought they had it all. They thought I was nothing. But what they didn't know, what they found out later in that courtroom, it left them absolutely speechless. It was a secret hidden in the one document they thought would protect them. This story is wild, and you won't believe the ending. Welcome to Inspiration Seeker. If you love stories about justice and seeing arrogant people get exactly what they deserve, you're in the right place. Make sure you subscribe and hit that like button so you never miss a story. And let me know in the comments, what would you do if this happened to you? Now, let me tell you exactly how it all started. For 10 years, my hands have been stained with grease. That's not a complaint. It's a fact. My name is James, and I'm a mechanic here in the suburbs of Chicago. It's honest work. When that lake effect wind whips through in January, you don't survive if your car isn't running right. I'm the guy people trust to make that happen. I work doubles. I took the weekend shifts, skipping Sunday football games and barbecues with my buddies. I did everything I could to build a decent, stable life for my wife, Patricia. I loved her. I really did. But lately, it felt like I was the only one trying. I'd come home, my bones aching from crawling under a 4-ton truck, my knuckles split open from a slipped wrench, and the first thing I'd hear wasn't, "How was your day?" It was a heavy sigh. Patricia would be flipping through a glossy magazine at our small kitchen table. "The neighbor got a new patio set," she'd say, not looking up. "Must be nice." Or, "My sister's gonna floor it again. Why can't we ever go anywhere, James?" It was never a question. It was an accusation. Her disappointment was like a fog in our small house, making my hard days work, the sweat on my brow feel small. And then there was her mother, Barbara. Barbara would visit twice a week, usually right at dinner time, as if she had a sensor for it. She'd walk in without knocking, look at the spaghetti I was making, and just tisk. She never spoke to me, only at me. "Patricia, honey," she'd say, ignoring me completely. "This wallpaper is so drab. You deserve so much better than this rundown box. I always said you were meant for bigger things." She'd say this while staring directly at my worn-out work boots by the door. To her, I wasn't a man. I was just another grease stain she wanted to wipe away from her daughter's life. I bit my tongue every single time. I just cleaned my plate, thank Patricia for dinner, even when I was the one who cooked it, and tell myself, "Work harder, James. Provide more. It'll get better." I genuinely believed that if I could just guess a little bit ahead, just ease the financial pressure, I'd get the woman I married back. I had no idea that getting ahead would be the very thing that destroyed everything we had. It happened on a Tuesday, a completely forgettable, rain-soaked Tuesday. I was on the couch, rubbing my temples, trying to calculate if we could afford a new water heater, or if I'd have to spend my Saturday patching the old one again. Patricia was at the kitchen table, scratching off a couple of lottery tickets she'd bought at the gas station. It was a habit I always found kind of pointless, but I never gave her a hard time about it. Suddenly, the silence was shattered. It wasn't a happy sound. It was a sharp, gasping scream that made my blood run cold. I jumped up, thinking a spider, a mouse, maybe she cut herself. "Patricia, what is it? What's wrong?" She was standing, but she was shaking so hard she was practically vibrating. Her face was chalk white, and her eyes were glued to that little piece of paper. "James," she whispered, and it was a ghost of a voice. "James, read this. Tell me I'm crazy." I took the ticket from her trembling hand. I looked at the numbers. I looked at the payout. My mind just couldn't process the zeros. 19.5, I said, my own voice sounding foreign. "Million. Dollars. Is this real?" She snatched it back and started laughing. Not a joyful laugh, but a high-pitched, hysterical cackle that was honestly a little scary. "We did it. We did it. We're rich. We're rich," she yelled, jumping up and down. And for a second, I was right there with her. A wave of pure, uncut relief washed over me. No more doubles. No more patching the water heater. No more barbarous sneers about our drab wallpaper. We're rich, I repeated, pulling her into a hug. Our lives, everything is going to change. Oh, how right I was. I was thinking we were rich. Our lives would change. Patricia, however, was already pulling away from my embrace, her phone in her hand. Her fingers were flying across the screen. Who are you calling? I asked, still smiling. Mom, she said, her voice already different. It wasn't shaky anymore. It was sharp. Mom needs to know. Before I could even suggest we wait, that we should maybe sit down and breathe for a minute, she was already yelling into the phone. Mom, you're not going to believe this. Get Robert. Get him right now and get over here. Our lives are over. She meant our old lives are over. But in hindsight, she was more accurate than she knew. I kid you not. It felt like maybe 10 minutes had passed before I heard the squeal of tires in our driveway. Barbara and Robert practically fell out of the car and burst to the front door. I'd never seen them move so fast. They didn't even look at me. They swarmed Patricia, grabbing the ticket, screaming, hugging. It wasn't a family celebration. It felt like a pack of wolves that had just cornered its prey. And I was already on the outside of the circle. The next few hours were a blur. I felt like a ghost in my own living room. The three of them, Patricia, Barbara, and Robert, were huddled at the kitchen table. The winning ticket was laid out in the center, like some kind of religious artifact. I tried to sit down to join the conversation, but they just talked around me. It was like I was invisible. Robert, a man who I don't think had ever worked a 40-hour week in his life, was already on his phone, scrolling through websites. A Lamborghini, Trish, he was saying, his voice giddy. You have to get the V12. We could take it to Vegas. Barbara, meanwhile, was scribbling furiously on a notepad. First things first, she announced, her voice booming with an authority I'd never heard before. We're selling this dump. I've already found a gated community in Barrington. We'll need a proper house. Something with a real dining room. And a pool, of course. I just stood there, my work boots suddenly feeling impossibly heavy. Guys, I said, trying to find my voice. Maybe we should slow down. We haven't even called the lottery office yet. We need a lawyer. We need a financial advisor. Barbara finally looked at me. She didn't just look. She glared, like I was a cockroach that just crawled onto her new marble countertop. James, she said, and her voice was pure ice. When we need advice from a greased monkey, we'll ask for it. This is family money. I was stunned. The insult was so direct, so venomous, it literally took my breath away. I looked at Patricia, expecting her, praying for her to defend me, to say, Mom, don't talk to him like that. We're in this together. She didn't. She wouldn't even meet my eyes. She just stared at the notepad. She's right, James, Patricia said quietly, but her voice had a new, hard edge. This is complicated. This is our family's chance. You don't understand this kind of money. Let us handle it. Us. Let us handle it. In that single moment, in the space of 3 hours, we had become us and you. The battle lines were drawn, and I didn't even know there was a war. They stayed up all night, drinking the expensive scotch I'd been saving for a special occasion, their voices getting louder, their laughter more manic. I just went to the garage. I sat on a stool next to my toolbox. The smell of oil and steel suddenly the only comfort I had left. I had no idea that was the last night I'd spend in my own home. I went to work the next day. It's the only thing I knew how to do. I must have looked like a zombie. My hands were on autopilot, changing oil, rotating tires, but my mind was spinning. I kept replaying Barbara's words, grease monkey, and Patricia's, let's handle it. I must have called her, I don't know, 5, 6 times from the break room. Every call went straight to voicemail. A cold, sick feeling was pooling in my gut, a feeling that this was moving faster than I could ever imagine. I kept telling myself, it's just the shock. She'll calm down. She'll call me. She'll remember me. My shift ended at 5 p.m. The drive home was the longest 15 minutes of my life. I was rehearsing what I'd say, how I'd be the calm one, how I'd protect her from her own family. I pulled into our driveway, and my stomach dropped. There was a brand new, gleaming black BMW parked where my 10-year-old truck usually sat. I hadn't ordered a BMW. I walked up to the front door, my keys in my hand. I put the key in the lock, and it didn't go in. I jiggled it. I pushed. Nothing. I looked closer. The entire lock set was new. Bright, shiny brass, mocking me. My key was now just a useless piece of metal. I pounded on the door. Patricia, what the hell is going on? Open the door. The door opened, but it wasn't Patricia who answered. It was Robert, holding a can of beer, a smug grin plastered on his face. Can I help you? He asked, like I was a salesman. Where is she? What did you do to my door? This isn't your door anymore, pal, he said, leaning against the frame. And that's when I saw it. To the side of the porch, next to the recycling bin, my canvas work duffel, 2 suitcases I hadn't used in years, and a single black trash bag. My blood ran cold. No. I whispered. Patricia and Barbara appeared behind Robert. Patricia. She was wearing a silk robe I'd never seen before, her hair professionally done. She looked like a stranger. Barbara just crossed her arms, a look of pure, triumphant victory on her face. Patricia? I begged, my voice cracking. What is this? She finally looked at me, and her eyes were empty. We're done, James, she said, her voice flat. My lawyer will be in touch. Your lawyer? Patty, this is our home. We're married. Robert laughed. He stepped outside, grabbed the black trash bag, and threw it onto the wet lawn. It split open, and my old T-shirts, a framed photo of my dad, and my toiletries spilled out onto the grass. Get off my sister's property, loser, he sneered. My entire body went numb. I was kicked out, thrown away, while my wife and her family, they just stood there and watched. They didn't just kick me out. They enjoyed it. You know, there's no manual for this. There's no part of your brain that knows what to do when your wife of 10 years treats you like garbage on the lawn. I just stood there for a minute, the rain starting to soak through my work jacket. The porch light clicked off, plunging me into darkness. They were gone, inside celebrating. I don't remember driving. I just remember ending up at my friend David's apartment. David's my oldest friend. We went to high school together, and he was the best man at my wedding. He opened the door, took one look at my face and the soaking wet suitcase in my hand, and his own face just crumpled in confusion. James? Man, what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost. I couldn't even speak. I just collapsed on his worn-out couch, and the whole story came pouring out. The ticket, the new BMW, Barbara's sneer, the trash bag. David didn't say anything at first. He just went to his kitchen, poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handed one to me, and said, You're staying here as long as you need. Period. For 3 days, I was a ghost. I'd just sit on that couch, staring at the TV, not even seeing what was on. I was numb, broken. I kept waiting for my phone to ring, for Patricia to text. I'm sorry, Mom made me do it. Please come home. The call never came. Instead, on the 4th day, a courier knocked on David's apartment door. He handed me a crisp, white envelope with a fancy law firm's logo embossed on the corner. Inside was a stack of papers, a divorce filing, and clipped to the front was a cashier's check. I looked at the amount, and it was like a second slap in the face. $15,000. It came with a letter from Patricia's new lawyer. It was cold, corporate, and brutal. It called the money a generous, one-time-only offer in exchange for me signing the divorce papers immediately, waiving all rights, and agreeing to a non-disclosure clause. Generous. They were offering me $15,000 out of a $19.5 million windfall. It wasn't a settlement. It was an insult. It was the price they'd put on 10 years of my life. David read the letter over my shoulder. I was just numb, but he got angry. 15 grand, he yelled, snatching the paper out of my hand. Is that what she thinks you're worth? Hell no. James, we are not letting this happen. You are not signing this. We're getting you a lawyer. Right now. I didn't have the energy to fight. Honestly, I didn't even have the energy to be angry. I just felt empty. But David, he had enough anger for the both of us. He spent that whole night on his laptop, not looking for a fancy downtown Chicago law firm. We both knew I couldn't afford that. But for someone local, someone tough, someone who hated bullies, the next day, he practically dragged me out of the apartment. "You're going to see Mary," he said, shoving a piece of paper with an address into my hand. "She's supposed to be a shark. Go." I walked into a small, no-nonsense office over a dry cleaner. The air smelled like coffee and old files. Mary was not what I expected. She wasn't in a fancy suit. She was wearing a simple blouse, and her hair was pulled back, but her eyes were like steel. They looked right through me. I fumbled through the story, feeling pathetic. I told her about the lottery, the $15,000 offer, my wife's family. I felt like I was admitting defeat before I even started. "Look," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "I don't have any money for a retainer. That check, it's all I have. I don't think what they did was right." Mary listened. She didn't interrupt, just steepled her fingers and watched me. When I was done, she was silent for a long moment. Then she asked the one question that changed everything. "Mr. Miller," she said, her voice sharp and clear, "was there a prenuptial agreement?" I blinked. The question caught me so off guard. My mind flashed back 10 years to a stuffy lawyer's office, just weeks before our wedding. "Yes," I said slowly, the memory coming back in a painful rush. "Yes, there was." "It wasn't my idea. It was Barbara's. She was obsessed with it. She was terrified. I don't know. Terrified I was some kind of gold digger who was going to steal her precious family's future wealth. It was ridiculous. They had nothing. We had nothing. But she hounded Patricia, insisted on it, said she wouldn't come to the wedding unless I signed it. I looked down at my grease-stained fingernails. I signed it just to keep the peace. I never thought about it again. Mary's expression didn't change, but a new kind of focus entered her eyes. It was the first time I'd seen anyone look at me with anything other than pity or contempt in a week. "Get me a copy of that agreement," she said, her voice all business. "Don't talk to them. Don't cash that check. Just get me that document. Today." Getting that prenup wasn't easy. My copy, of course, was in a filing cabinet back in the house I was locked out of. Mary just nodded, like this was a minor inconvenience. "I'll file a motion," she said simply. It took 2 agonizing days, but a scanned copy finally landed in her email inbox. I was a wreck. I was convinced the document would just be the final nail in my coffin, a legally binding confirmation that I was worth nothing. I sat in her office, my leg bouncing, while she read. Her face was pure granite. She just scrolled and scrolled and scrolled. The silence was deafening. "Well," she said finally, leaning back in her chair, "this is quite the document. It's bad, isn't it?" I mumbled, feeling the last bit of hope drain away. "Oh, it's bad," Mary said, a tiny, almost invisible smile playing at the corner of her mouth. "It's a textbook, Protect the Princess Prenup. Barbara's fingerprints are all over this. It's designed clause by clause to protect every single asset Patricia had or ever might have before the marriage." She spun her monitor around. "Look at this. Section 3A. All premarital property, inheritances, or gift from the wife's family shall remain the sole and separate property of the wife. Typical. Section 3B. Any appreciation in value of said separate property shall also remain separate. Blah, blah, blah. It's an ironclad wall. They were terrified you were going to take her mother's antique china. So I'm screwed," I said flatly. "That," Mary said, turning the monitor back to her, "is what they want you to think." She scrolled down to a different section. But their lawyer, in an attempt to look fair, while also protecting their imaginary dynasty, added a few interesting clauses. I believe Barbara, in her arrogance, insisted on this next part. She wanted to define everything. She stopped scrolling. "Here we are. Clause 4B. I'll read it to you." She put on a pair of reading glasses. "To ensure a fair and equitable partnership, Any Rejiki non-ploc. A what? I asked. It's a legal term, she said. A windfall. It continues. Any windfall or speculative winnings, including but not limited to gambling or lottery prizes, acquired during the marriage, shall be divided equally into 3 designated parts. 1 part 1/3 for the husband, 1 part 1/3 for the wife, and 1 part 1/3 for a family trust fund. I just stared at her. My brain couldn't catch up. What does that mean? Mary took off her glasses and looked me dead in the eye. It means, she said, her voice dropping, that Barbara was so obsessed with controlling her daughter's future money, she accidentally guaranteed you 1/3 of it. The weeks leading up to the court date were the strangest of my life. I was still broke, still living on David's couch, and still going to work at the shop every day. My hands were still covered in grease, but now I had a secret, a $6.5 million secret. The day of the hearing, I walked into that courtroom wearing the only suit I owned, the one I got married in. It felt baggy and smelled faintly of mothballs. And then they walked in. It was like a scene from a bad movie. Patricia, Barbara, and Robert. They looked expensive. Patricia was in a sharp, black designer dress I'd never seen. Her hair perfect, a pair of dark sunglasses perched on her head like she was a celebrity. Robert was wearing a suit that was clearly too tight, and Barbara looked like she'd been poured into a floral dress, dripping with new gold jewelry. They weren't walking. They were strutting. They saw me, sitting there with Mary, and Barbara actually smirked. She nudged Patricia, and they shared a quiet little laugh. My stomach churned. I felt that familiar sting of humiliation. Mary just put a hand on my arm. "Don't," she whispered. "Let them. It's all for the show. Their show." Their lawyer, a slick man with a gold watch that probably cost more than my truck, stood up first. He was loud, confident, and dismissive. "Your Honor," he boomed, "this is an open-end shut case, a waste of the court's valuable time." He motioned toward me. Mr. Miller's contributions to this marriage were modest at best. My client, Ms. Patricia Miller, on the other hand, has been blessed by fortune. She used her own money to purchase a lottery ticket. Her ticket, her winnings. He scoffed, pacing in front of the judge. In a pathetic, last-ditch money grab, Mr. Miller is now trying to claim half of a prize he had absolutely nothing to do with. He's entitled to nothing. In fact, my client generously offered him a $15,000 settlement to simply go away, which he foolishly refused. He held up the prenup, waving it like a trophy. And before he tries to argue marital assets, this prenuptial agreement, which Mr. Miller signed of his own free will, makes it abundantly clear my client's assets are protected. He slapped the document down on his table. "We are asking the court to dismiss this ridiculous claim and enforce the terms of the $15,000 offer so my client can move on with her life." I sank lower in my chair. He was so convincing. I looked at the judge, whose face was unreadable. Then I looked at Patricia. She was already checking her lipstick in a compact mirror. She wasn't even listening. She'd already won. The slick lawyer sat down, looking like he'd just scored a game-winning touchdown. He even gave Robert a little chin-up nod. I could feel my hands sweating. I mean, he sounded right, didn't he? The judge, a woman with a face that looked like it was carved from stone, turned her gaze to us. "Counselor," she asked Mary, "your response." Mary stood up. She didn't pace. She didn't raise her voice. She just walked to the center, holding one neatly tabbed document. "Thank you, Your Honor," she said, and her voice was so calm it was almost terrifying. Opposing counsel is absolutely correct about one thing. This entire case does rest on the prenuptial agreement. The very one, I might add, that Ms. Barbara Miller insisted my client sign. Barbara actually preened at that, like she'd been complimented. "He spoke at length," Mary continued, "about Section 3, which protects all of Ms. Miller's premarital assets. And he's right. It's ironclad. But in his, enthusiasm, he seems to have neglected to read the rest of the document, specifically Clause 4B. I watched the other table. The slick lawyer's smile twitched. He frowned, grabbing his own copy. his assistant suddenly looking panicked. "What? For B?" I heard him mutter. Barbara leaned forward. "What is she doing?" she hissed at him. "I'll read Clause 4B for the court," Mary said, her voice clear as a bell. "As it seems to be new information for the opposing side, it reads, to ensure a fair and equitable partnership, any windfall or speculative winnings, including but not limited to gambling or lottery prizes, acquired during the marriage, shall be divided equally into 3 designated parts." Mary paused, letting the words hang in the dead silent room. I could see the blood drain from Barbara's face. She can't," Barbara started, half rising from her chair. Mary wasn't finished. "It continues, 1 part, 1/3 for the husband, 1 part, 1/3 for the wife, and 1 part, 1/3 for a family trust fund." The slick lawyer was standing now, his face a mottled, ugly red. "Your Honor, this is a semantic trick. That family trust fund doesn't even exist." Patricia, who had finally put her compact mirror away, looked utterly lost. "Mom," she whispered, her voice high and trembling. "Mom, what does that mean?" Mary held up a hand. "He's right, Your Honor. The family trust fund doesn't exist. They never created it. But that doesn't change what this clause, which their lawyer drafted, legally sets in motion." She turned, and for the first time, she looked directly at me, then at the judge. "This isn't a money grab. This is a simple, contractual obligation. $19.5 million divided by 3 is $6.5 million. We are here today to claim the $6.5 million that is legally and contractually owed to my client." The courtroom was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. That slick lawyer was sputtering, flipping through his copy of the prenup like it was on fire. "Your Honor, it's an ambiguity. It's clearly not what was intended." The judge, who had been listening to all of this with zero expression, finally leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the lawyer. "Counselor," she said, her voice dangerously low, "are you arguing that a document your firm drafted, a document you just 5 minutes ago called ironclad, is now ambiguous?" He had no answer. He just opened and closed his mouth like a fish. The judge looked at Barbara. "Ma'am, did you insist on this document?" Barbara, white as a sheet, could only nod, her new gold necklaces suddenly looking like a noose. The judge's gaze was sharp. "Well, you got exactly what you wanted. You wanted to protect your family's assets. You were so worried about potential wealth. You put in a clause to control all of it. You just weren't smart enough to read what you signed." She picked up her gavel. "This court finds no ambiguity. The prenuptial agreement is valid, binding, and clear. The $19.5 million prize is to be divided exactly as Clause 4B dictates." Patricia finally found her voice. It was a thin, reedy shriek. No, that's my money." The judge slammed the gavel. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. "Order." She looked at Mary. 1/3 of the winnings, $6.5 million, is awarded to the husband, Mr. James Miller. I let out a breath I didn't even know I was holding. Mary's hand squeezed my arm. "We're not done," she whispered. The judge continued. 1/3, $6.5 million, is awarded to the wife, Miss Patricia Miller. As for the final third, the judge said, looking over her glasses, the portion allocated to the non-existent family trust fund. Since this trust was never legally established, that $6.5 million remains a joint marital asset. As such, under the laws of the state, it is subject to a 50-50 division. It took a second for that to sink in. Barbara actually screamed. "What? No!" Robert just stared, his mouth open. "Wait, so he gets more?" The judge looked at me. Mr. Miller is awarded his 1/3, plus half of the unallocated third. The total award for the plaintiff is $9.75 million. The slick lawyer just collapsed into his chair. But the real show was Barbara. Her face was a mask of pure, unfiltered rage. She wasn't looking at me. She wasn't looking at the judge. She was looking at Patricia. You idiot!" she shrieked, her voice echoing in the courtroom. You let this happen. You lost it. You lost our money. Robert, realizing his Lamborghini was evaporating, joined in. Mom's right, Trish. You just let this grease monkey rob us. They weren't a team anymore. They were just what I'd always seen, a pack of vultures, and they had just turned on each other. I didn't say a word. I just stood up, straightened my old wedding suit, and with Mary at my side, I walked right past them. I walked out of that courtroom, leaving the sound of their family tearing itself apart behind me. I was still covered in grease, but now I was free.